Management Fundamentals. I'm Matthew Peasy.
I'm Keisha Johnson, Senior Product Manager at Help Scout, where I own their mobile app experiences as well as their mobile SDK experiences. What Help Scout is a customer service support platform where we provide both shared inbox and knowledge-based services to our customers. So essentially, we're helping our customers help their customers. And what we do is try to figure out what is the experience that a customer should have when they're on a mobile device, whether that's a phone or a tablet. And so it's a lot about understanding, well, what are people doing when they're on a mobile device? Oftentimes they're on the go, they might not be at a desk. And so their experience and their needs on the go are a little bit different than when they're sitting, at a desk all day. And so that's really what we're focused on. We've recently delivered some really nice features that help give some more context to our customers as they're responding to their customers in our queue. And so oftentimes, when you're at a desk, you have multiple tabs open. You don't have that option when you're on a mobile device. So how can we provide all of the context that you would have when you're on a desktop, but when you're on a mobile app instead?
The first thing I'll say when learning about what product is that many of the things you learn can apply to anyone studying entrepreneurship or even design. Product is interconnected with those two things. There's no escaping that. A good product manager has vision, good business instincts, and an unwavering drive to make things better, and an ability to collaborate with a variety of partners, leading to the ultimate goal of delivering value to customers and for the business. For our purposes, I'm not really talking about products like the coffee we drink or the clothes we wear, but rather, more practically, digital products, software and technology. The web browser that you're using to watch this course, that is a product, and that product requires a product manager, or several. When you have something like an application or a platform, the organizational structure for how that product is managed within the company will differ. Let me open my phone, and what I'll do is launch a popular social media application, let's say Instagram. The Instagram application has a bunch of different features, and each feature is fairly complex and most likely important to the business. Instagram has major features like stories and reels and notifications. There's also search and shopping. One potential scenario from an organizational standpoint is that each of these features have their own product teams. You can almost think of these as feature teams, each led by a product manager. And it can break down further from there. It's very possible that the Reels feature has several product teams, one to work on the Reels feed and another in the Reels posting feature. And it can continue to break down based on the functionality. Another possibility is that an application like Instagram could be broken up into platforms, meaning there's a product manager and team managing the iOS app, and another for the Android app, one more for the smart TV app, and yet another for desktop browsers. The takeaway here is that a product, in the sense of what product managers can manage, can be anything, from a feature within a larger application to an application running on a specific platform. Ultimately, the business model of the organization will dictate what that looks like. But when you hear the word product, it's not simply defined by that coffee maker or the pair of shoes that you want. Of course, those are products, but the product we're talking about here is a collection or grouping of features, and each of those features could require its own product team and its own product manager. So where did this idea of product and product teams come from? Well, let's find out. Our history lesson starts on May 23, 1931. Neil H. McElroy was a junior executive at Procter & Gamble. Now, Procter & Gamble at the time had many consumer goods, as it does today, that it sold under a variety of brands. He was managing the Camay brand of soap. Procter & Gamble wanted McElroy to oversee a new era of sustained growth for the product. In his mind, to achieve this, he would need a different approach, an approach that would require him to ask the business for additional employees. To argue for those new hires, he wrote a memo. The memo isn't very long. It's just a few pages. But McElroy makes the case for having one individual be responsible for the marketing of one brand in the overall portfolio of products that Procter & Gamble offered. Ivory Soap and Crisco Shortening were two of its most popular brands, and in this memo, he makes the case that one team should be focused on one brand. Why should someone need expertise in marketing Ivory Soap and Crisco Shortening? Instead, it made sense to have one person or team focus all efforts on that one brand and own it as if it was its own business. He called people doing this work, and remember it was the 30s, brand men. As they would own the brand, they would be responsible for tracking sales, managing product advertisements, and having assistant brand men in the field interacting with customers. This would consolidate brand responsibilities that were distributed across different departments, especially the sales team, into one single role. Ultimately, this memo caused Procter & Gamble to restructure into a brand-centric organization. And it worked. McElroy went on to be the president of Procter & Gamble before being appointed the Secretary of Defense for the United States.
Is the scene of a significant ceremony as President Eisenhower decorates outgoing Defense Secretary Wilson with the Medal of Freedom and thanks him for his service to the nation. His successor, Neil McElroy, is sworn in and congratulated by the chief executive, who laughingly comments, "Now you're a bureaucrat." The Defense Department, with its $39 billion appropriation, is a post demanding one of Washington's top administrators.
His brand management influence didn't end there. His model of brand men influenced young entrepreneurs all over. Two, in particular, Bill Hewlett and David Packard. Bill and David took this concept of brand men and created the product manager role. The difference being that brand men largely took responsibility from the sales team. Product managers at HP would make decisions on behalf of the engineering teams and advocate for their users and their needs. Hewlett-Packard innovated the idea of division structure, where each product group was an autonomous, self-sustaining organization responsible for conceptualizing, marketing, and producing their own products. And the idea here was to keep divisions intentionally small. If it got too big, it would be split into different divisions. This structure was one of the main reasons why Hewlett-Packard experienced sustained growth of 20% year over year for 50 years in a row. About 10 years after HP was founded, Toyota was working on an experiment to get from concept to viable product for the consumer quicker. The result was called just-in-time manufacturing. But what's really important here are two key principles that emerged from this experiment. One, Kaizen, which means incremental improvement, and another, Genchi Genbutsu, which I won't attempt to translate word for word, but the premise is that you go to the location or source, and in this case, the source is the customer, to find out the facts about what needs improvement. These two concepts proved to be so valuable that HP adopted them for their product management teams. Product managers would stay close to the customer and advocate for them within the engineering teams. Of course, there's more to this story, but in the interest of time, you can see what McElroy's brand men, in combination with what HP and Toyota were doing, really laid the groundwork for the modern product manager role. Of course, the software industry would further refine it. More on that next. We talked about how the idea of product management came to be, but let's fast forward in time. Scott Cook, a Procter & Gamble brandman, founded a company called Intuit. They launched Quicken, a prosumer accounting application for everyone, a milestone product using classic product management philosophies. They identified a specific user segment, understood the needs of that user, and delivered a product to meet those needs, and continue to iterate and improve the product with point releases and upgrades. Along the way, the introduction of practices like Scrum and Agile, Lean Startup, and human-centered design further refine how we look at and manage products, especially in the tech sector. Don't get overly hung up on those practices for the moment. Each of them requires some level of explanation, and we'll get there at some point. Finally, I think it would be appropriate to point to Google as another milestone moment that led to explosive growth within the product manager role. Larry Page and Sergey Brin hired a talented engineer, Marissa Mayer, and her insight into customer needs and creating roadmaps enforced a rigid vision across Google's offering, ultimately moving her from the engineering department to the first product manager role at the company. Vanity Fair referred to Marissa as someone who's not a manager of people, but a manager of ideas. She created the Google Associate Product Manager program at the company, which was set up to recruit and mentor the next generation of product managers. The success of companies like HP and Intuit, in combination with Google's explosive growth, made all companies revisit the product manager role. Important product managers at these companies were calling the shots to meet objectives of the organizations. Product managers stopped reporting to marketing or engineering and got a seat at the table with the CEO, and it became its own dedicated function. Comparison in the sense that a product manager doesn't have the authority of a CEO, but a product manager like a CEO should be capable of laying out a vision and a path to fulfill that vision. Martin Erickson, co-founder of Mind the Product and Product Tank, created this seemingly now famous Venn diagram, illustrating where product managers sit. And you can see it's at the intersection of technology, business, and user experience. Does this mean you need expertise in each of these areas? No, not really. A great analogy is that a product manager is much like a conductor of an orchestra. Most likely, they don't have expertise or skill in playing all the instruments, but they excel at guiding musicians to create the symphony. So, a product manager has to get the functions of the organization to play well together, to deliver the best products. That being said, as a product manager, having a basic understanding of technology and the effort required to implement a vision from an engineering perspective is critical. You can't ask your development team to perform at an unrealistic level. As far as the user experience, again, you don't have to be a masterful designer. Rather, you have to act as the voice for the customer inside the business and actively participate in product testing and getting firsthand feedback from the users. Finally, and critically, the part that can easily get tossed aside is the business component. While you are trying to deliver value to the customer, that value has to play double duty and deliver results for the business. And it's honestly not that complicated. They go hand in hand. If you provide value to the customer, they buy more and use more of your product. And as they do that, that means revenue for the business. Is that an oversimplification? Sure, but you get the point. But if you're talking about product management or being an entrepreneur of a startup, many of the skills are the same. It's all about creating something your customers will love. So how do you do this? There's a couple different parts, but first, you have to define a vision for your product. How do you do that? In one word, research. You have to research your market, research your customer, and research the problems that they're facing. You need to gather massive amounts of information, of data, feedback from customers, potential customers, look at the competition, understand market trends. You have to know as much as possible about the market and your customer. And that will be your starting point for you to define your vision. Once you define a vision, you have to evangelize it within the organization. You have to build excitement and an understanding of what it is that you're building. This will motivate developers, salespeople, and hopefully others within your organization to at least share some of the passion for your product. You want them to become evangelists for you. You also have to create a strategy, an actionable plan to achieve that vision, one that accommodates areas for incremental improvement along the way. You'll find that your days are filled with looking over data, looking over how customers use your product, talking to them about your product, finding out if they want to pay for your product, and trying to understand if you're solving the right problems that they're facing. And you do this over and over again. So, if that's the general idea of what a product manager does, how do these other roles I referred to earlier differ? Remember, I mentioned there's roles like product director, product owner, product designer, and a product marketing manager. Again, I want to stress that different organizations may do this differently, but this is a good general explanation as to how these roles differ from a product manager. First, product director or VP of product. They coach and develop product teams. They make sure everyone is working together and ensure that there is alignment within the business's overall strategy and objectives. Put in the most simple terms, they're the leader of product managers. Product owner. Occasionally, a product manager and a product owner are used interchangeably, but they shouldn't. The idea of a product owner comes from Scrum, and if you dig into Scrum, and again, we'll touch on this a little bit later, product owners have three main responsibilities. They define the product backlog, which is a term used for a list of various features a particular product will have. A team won't build all the features out of the gate, so what they'll do is create a list or a backlog of all the future things to work on. Then they create an actionable plan for the work based on that backlog. Second, they prioritize the backlog, which is to say they decide in which order of the list the features will be worked on. Third, they look at the completed work from their plan they made in the first step to make sure that the work fulfills the plans they laid out. But product owners don't think about things like, are we building the right thing? That's still the role of the product manager. And again, let me be clear, not all product teams have product owners. They appear if you're running product in a way that aligns with the Scrum philosophy. Next, the product designer. We mentioned that product managers sit at the intersection of business, technology, and design. Product designers are the design piece of that equation. If a product manager is the what and the why of the product designer is the how. The main thing that a product designer is responsible for is doing user research and workflow designs. They plan by creating style guides and user personas. They work closely with UX researchers and UI designers. They ultimately are responsible for what the product looks and feels like. You may also hear the term product marketing manager, and the key term here is marketing. Again, the product manager is responsible for leading how the product is created. The product marketing manager is responsible for leading the marketing strategy for the product. They shape the communication around the product, determine how to position it in the marketplace, and they can even have a hand in pricing the product. You can think of a product marketing manager as sitting at the intersection of sales, marketing, and product. This, of course, is not all-encompassing. Technical product managers, data product managers, and growth product managers are also other roles you'll hear in the product world. They are similar to the product manager role, but they have an added specialization. Again, here I'm trying to give you explanations that are purposefully simple because you'll undoubtedly be exposed to them throughout your product management learning journey. I wanted you to have a basic understanding of what they were. Of course, the focus of this training will be on the product manager role. One last thing that I'll leave you with. Organizations typically have two different versions of product managers. One that works on internal products and another that works on customer or consumer-facing products. An internal product manager will work on products for internal company initiatives. Let's say a team within the organization needs some type of internal tooling. An internal product manager would be responsible for that product. It's a product for the organization's employees to help them do their jobs. An internal product manager tends to have a little less stress associated with it, as your customer is a smaller team within the company that you work for. You don't have the pressure of building a viable product to drive revenue for the organization. It's not to say that there's no pressure, but the stakes are certainly not as high. Alternatively, a product manager that builds products for customers outside the organization, whether they're other businesses or individual consumers, do carry the added weight of trying to create a viable product for the business itself. Generally, these products are also more complex that require input from other parts of the organization, like legal departments and marketing departments. Before we move on and take a closer look at what's involved in the product management world, let's talk about what makes a good product. What makes a good product? It's an incredibly common question that I get all the time. It seems like people are grasping for a recipe to follow so they can develop good products themselves, especially new product managers. Before we go any further, let me say this. Every product is different. Every product should solve a unique problem. That's the foundation of a good product. But to offer a little more depth to answer the question, what makes a good product? Let's talk about some common characteristics of good products. First, using the assumption we're talking about digital products, it should have great user onboarding. What does that mean? In simple terms, it means that the user can start using the product, and if there's any friction whatsoever, you should be able to offer some type of support, and that can come in the way of some tutorials or guidance or animated explainer GIFs, whatever the case may be. But in the end, the user should quickly and easily use the product to achieve their goals. If you do that, it means they're more likely to have a great experience, and they'll share that experience with friends, family, and coworkers. It'll also have a positive impact on metrics like activation, retention, and conversions. Second, a good product will solve a problem. Think about some apps that you already use that do a great job of this. Grubhub, Waze, Uber, obvious examples, but they're obvious now because they're so good. They've become widely successful. But each of these products really resonated with their audience because the organizations making them really understood their customers' problems and pain points. And they delivered a solution that solved those problems with an intuitive, easy-to-use application, which their customers loved. They also found pent-up demand within the market for these services, and that's really important. Andy Ratcliffe of Wealthfront used a great example. He said, if you address a market that really wants your product, if the dogs are eating the food, then you can mess up just about everything in your company and you'll still succeed. Conversely, if you're really good at execution, but the dogs won't eat the food, then you have no chance. You may hear this referred to as product market fit, which is a different topic we'll touch on a little bit later. Third, the product's time to value should be short. What you want to have happen here is have the user quickly as possible realize that your product adds tremendous value to them, which means they have few barriers to understanding your product, which goes back to my first point about good user onboarding, and that trickles down throughout the entire experience for the user. What was the last app you deleted off your phone? Do you remember? Do you remember the reason? Avoid that with the products you build. Next, the product should look good. And while this may sound simple, it's more important than you think. It does a lot for the product. Not only does it add a level of professionalism, but it also allows the user to be happy with their experience. If you can make your users build an emotional connection with your product, it becomes important to them and possibly part of their everyday life. There's so many organizations that have huge brand loyalty: Nike, Disney, Apple, Tesla, not only because their products become part of the customer's life, but more importantly, they become something that the customer is really proud of. There are some obvious red flags for a bad product idea. One, it'll not have an identifiable USP or unique selling proposition. If your users can't figure out what makes your product different from competitors, it's most likely not a great product idea. Second, if you have to convince your customers that it's a good product, it's probably not. It should be obvious to the customer how it's valuable. A couple other red flags would be a lack of demand for similar products that already exist. So, that's some food for thought on what makes a good product. But in order to have a good product, you need someone good at managing that product. What are some key characteristics of a good product manager? Well, I'm glad you asked. You might ask yourself, what do I need to be a good product manager? Well, there's a few qualities. First, great product managers are obsessed with their users or customers. And this obsession is a huge motivator for delivering the best possible customer experience. They learn what challenges the customer is experiencing, and they try to solve those problems. Additionally, a product manager has to cultivate a customer-centric approach as part of their cross-functional team's culture. Most of this starts with an open dialogue with the customer. You need to understand why they selected your product or service over your competitors. You want an understanding of what they hope to accomplish. Second, product intuition. This means having the insights and instincts to understand how to solve customer needs with a product. What features will not only eliminate problems they're facing, but how to delight and impress them at the same time. Obviously, industry experience here will prove to be invaluable, and you should seize that knowledge. One criticism I'd have for many people working in product is this notion that you can't know anything unless the customer asks for it. Don't get me wrong, customer involvement is critical to the product development process. But there's a great quote from Henry Ford. If I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. It's up to you to understand the problems that your user is facing and develop solutions for them. Don't expect the customer to tell you what they need, because they'll say things like faster horses. Even if you don't have industry experience, you'll find that good product managers have the skill set to immerse themselves in the industry and quickly learn about the customers and their needs. Another really important quality is the ability to prioritize. You have to balance the value of a proposed feature versus the engineering work required to accomplish it, and the potential revenue from that feature. You have to determine what's most important and balance that with the feasibility of when you can deliver it. Having the ability to make these decisions based on these factors will be critical if you want to be a successful product manager. Next, your ability to execute strategically. You have to convince supporting teams and different resources to get behind the product, help launch it, and then help maintain it. Product managers will partner with departments like engineering and design, but also legal and customer support, and possibly finance to execute the product roadmap. As a product manager, you need to keep a pulse on the industry and how it's evolving and adjust to make sure your product is poised to capitalize on changes happening in the business landscape. In all of that, cross-functional collaboration means you have to have great communication skills. A good portion of what a product manager does is communicating trade-offs and priorities to diverse groups of colleagues and external stakeholders. Finally, metrics and data-driven decision-making. You build what you measure. You'll find as a product manager, you'll work with the data science team to establish a set of metrics that the product team should track. Figuring out those metrics can be difficult. And honestly, even if you get the right metrics, it can sometimes drive the wrong behavior. So like everything in product, this will be an ongoing process. Okay, so we've talked quite a bit about what product is, what a product manager does, and what makes good products. And this was really meant to act as a gentle introduction. We'll get more in depth in a bit, but before we do, let's chat about what product organizations look like and what the product development process looks like.